Welcome to the In-Betwixt and In-Between. This is Leadership Limbo, a podcast aimed at helping leaders embrace the discomfort and power of leading themselves and others in the midst of it all. We blend real insight with practical tools to help you lead with self-awareness, purpose, and influence wherever you are on your leadership journey. We are your hosts, Josh Hugo and John Clark. And John, it's good to see you today.
Josh, good to see you. How's your week been? Are we in the second week of October at this point, right? Is that right? First full week?
I think we officially turned into that second week. Yeah,
Nice.
it's been a busy week. It's been a good week. Excited to spend some time tomorrow. You and I actually will get to spend some time at a really, what I think will be a great learning convention with charter school leaders around the state of Colorado tomorrow here. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, me too.
Pick up the pace of the week a little bit.
Yeah, no, it'll be good. Get us out and about, chatting with some folks and connecting. Yeah, weather's been awesome. I went for a long walk this morning because I'm learning. I play basketball on Tuesday night, so I'm learning basically in the aftermath of that, my workouts have to be pretty light on my legs so I can get my knee working and operating again so I can play basketball again the next Tuesday. So that's what happens when you're over 40, I think, is you do one intense activity and then have to ease into it the rest of the week. But they tell me walking is just as good as anything else, even though it feels like a cop out, but I know it's not. So,
well, it's good for your brain. Somebody posted the other day too that your brain waves after walking are in a much more productive state, even after a 20-minute walk. So it's a really, great exercise in multiple ways, and it's a little less abusive to your body than, say, basketball.
I can only abuse my body once a week, and so
that's about right. Yeah, that's about right. You expect 6 days for that knee to get back to where you can play on it again, and then it just you hit reset and go back to another week of kind of limping around. It's fun.
That's right. Cool. Who's going, Josh? What do we got for this week? Or
we want to say this at the front end of the podcast, but please subscribe and share this podcast. We know that by the time the music plays at the end, most of us are signing off that podcast. And so, which is fine. And we would like to remind you that your subscriptions do matter. You sharing this podcast is the best way for this information, for this podcast to get into the hands of other listeners. And so please take a moment. If you are listening to this for the first time, give it the full episode and then decide. But if you are listening to this for the second, third, fifth time and you haven't yet subscribed, make sure you do so on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on.
Well, I'm going to be more direct than Josh. Even if this is your first time, go ahead and download it. It'll be great. You'll love it. Many of these episodes, you'll want to listen to it. Go ahead and pause right now and leave a 5-star review also. And if you can, leave a comment. We would love that. It helps build circulation. Just help us out here. I know most people don't spend their time doing it, but it does help us. We love doing this, but also want to grow our audience. So please go ahead and do those and then come back to the pod in about 30 seconds. Thank you.
Yeah. This is unscripted. This part will be unscripted, but I mean, please, I hope it's good enough to get a 5-star review. I hope it's good enough to get a 5-star review, but if you think it's 4 stars, you can give us 4, give us an honest appraisal, but, an overly emotional appraisal of the podcast, maybe step back for an hour or two and then come back and see if that is actually what you would give it. But no, we do want your honest feedback. We do, of course, want you to be involved in sharing this and giving us feedback as well. So homework from last week, your motives. What are some of your motives, your tendencies? Are you seeking to be interesting or interested? So we talked a lot about building that self-awareness around your intentions as a communicator. And we believe this topic is so important, we're actually going to spend more time on this today. And John will share with us in a minute, but I'm curious for listeners, did you learn anything as you thought about your tendencies? If you thought and reflected on the ways that maybe, you know what, I do tend to show up in conversations really seeking to get that laugh, trying to, impress people with how much I know, share the cool thing I recently did. We've all done that, right? But I think when you assess that and you reflect on it, it can give you a little bit of I do that sometimes. And what would it look like for me to not do that? What would the impact be on the relationship, on the communication, on my team? So hopefully that was a helpful exercise. And John, anything to add? And then tell us what we're doing today.
If you already did it, great. But bonus to that would go to someone you trust and be like, tell me some tick or tendency of my communication that I may not be aware of, right? I've been married for what year is it? 15 years now. And
What?
you get comfortable with someone and you can ask them, and most of the time they'll start delivering it to you because they have to work with you. They have to live with you on a daily basis. So people you've worked with for a long time, your partner, again, we talk about older children you might have that know this. Let them tell you, right? They will. Even my 6-year-old and sometimes my 3-year-old can tell me ways I'm communicating or not communicating well that I have to adjust on. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But if you haven't done that, do that this week too, because it's hard sometimes just to know. But if you go to others, they will tell you, I believe.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Great. So yeah, today I'm thrilled to. We've talked about this. We've referenced it the last 2 times, but Josh's kind of mathematical equation related to communication is this idea that communication is transmitting plus receiving information, the transmission plus the reception of communication. And that's the whole focus of today's. Although really excited, to me, one of the fun things about doing this podcast is I think there's times where I bring new ideas that are new to Josh and we get to converse on those. And today's one where Josh is bringing a really good framework that I'm really pumped to utilize and how I think about the different purposes for how I communicate and why I communicate. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. And it's going to fit within this theme of talking about the difference between and the importance of both transmission and receiving information, right? I think, if anyone does any work on communication or thinking about it, that it's both of these things. But more intuitively, I think people tend to fall towards the transmission of information. How do I get this information to people? Anything from how do I email this to what's the right way to deliver this in a meeting? And so people tend to spend a lot of time on the transmitting of ideas, right? And so the reality of this is that when you transmit, you have to be fully aware of how you want people to receive that. Right? If you're just thinking that I said it the way I needed to say it and that was right, but you're doing no kind of cognitive lift in terms of what is the way that I've set the conditions for people to receive this, or what's the way that I followed up on this to make sure that they've received it, then you're going to have a lot of problems, right? So, we've written here that it's the reality that you transmitting does not yield receiving from your team. If that's the case, if they're not receiving it, you're going to have to adjust the way you communicate, or you might help. Honestly, this is true too. You might have to help them adjust to how the conditions by which they are receiving it, right? Maybe you have to put in 10 minutes into a staff meeting where people read the weekly memo to get the information. Maybe you have to have a minute where you really set some norms around communication devices, computers, other things in meetings, and how we, get those out of the space so everyone can be fully attuned to listening. Josh talked about the metric last week of using a meeting assessment. Maybe one of your metrics is, did we have the conditions to receive information well today? Right? So you have to do both of those. It's also navigating how you receive communication and how that might require your own adjustment. Right? We talk about the need for receptive language, and you have to practice things that allow you to get information well. Okay. I think before I dive a little bit more into that, there's a few, these aren't leadership specific ones, although I guess the first one I'll start with is you've probably seen a lot of Simon Sinek, a lot of videos, a lot of good books by Simon Sinek, good thought leader when it comes to leadership, or thought leader when it comes to this.
Know your why. Know your why. Is a really famous one.
So there's a small clip. We're actually going to put it in the show notes. He talks a little bit, and both of these are examples about cell phones, but I think they speak to the nature of distraction in our world and how we're prevented from listening because we're always in this mode of being available in other ways that are important versus being with the person in front of us. He talks about what's the value of when you're talking to someone and you're holding your phone. Or more importantly, I'm in a meeting with you and I put that phone on my table right in front of me. I might be fully ready to listen to Josh in that moment, but what Josh sees and knows is maybe I'm not as ready to receive because I have this phone in front of me and I'm ready to respond to it or use it, and he's too focused on the fact that I have that. So I haven't set the conditions or symbol or kind of transmitted to this person that I'm ready to listen fully because it's out there. So he does a good job talking about that. Check out that video. The other one has to do with this 2008 article from The Atlantic. So a little bit dated, but not still applicable. The title of the article is called, I'm going to read it here, The Dangers of Distracted Parenting. So this is about parenting. We talk a lot about the distractions of phones and the implications of phones when it comes to youth, but there's a huge element of this that comes to us as adults when we're working with children. And I would argue in our case,
anyone.
Well, yeah, exactly. As a man, in this case, as a manager, how I'm showcasing my receptivity to someone else talking to me, or in some cases, how I'm listening to my boss. So I just want to here's a brief overview of the article. And I think it says some key things here. An Atlantic article from 2018 titled The Dangers of Distracted Parenting discusses how chronic parental distraction due to smartphones can lead to missed emotional cues and irritability. Okay. I want to name that because what we're talking about here isn't the danger of a kid getting injured because of you being on your phone. That can happen, right? We can talk about that differently. But the bigger thing is the missed emotional cues and irritability affecting both parents and children. Other articles highlight how phone use in general affects children's ability to manage emotions, fosters a phone based childhood, impacts the social, emotional, cognitive development, leading to a greater need for parental attention and a desire for real world experiences. So, but that line again that I really want to hone on to is missing emotional cues or even your child's irritability. That is something you have to fully attune yourself all times when you're working with folks, right? Am I understanding your emotional cues? Am I understanding things so I can respond to them effectively? Or am I only hearing half of it? And then actually the way I respond while maybe getting part of what you said is not fully getting what you said. And so I'm not really receiving that information well. And so again, I think we're going to talk a lot about one. There are a lot of ways that working with coaches like Josh, myself, your manager, you can think about better ways to deliver information, how to make it more palatable to folks. And that's key. Don't miss the part where you're actually thinking about skills that set you up to listen better. What am I doing with my computer at this time? Where's my phone? What else have I done to, like, what notes do I have in front of me to remind myself to focus in the moment on what this person is saying to me? Do I take notes of what the person's doing? Do I ask them to repeat things because I want to better understand it? Am I asking questions before responding? So lots to think about here. Josh, take it away from there. What do you think about that? Give us some of your ideas when it comes to transmission and reception of communication.
No, I love that. I love what you shared. I think what you're really getting at is setting the conditions for communication.
Yeah.
Setting the conditions for effective communication. This could become the multiple podcasts too. I think it's such a great point. But I think that the question that just sparks me, of course, is yes, the literal technology pieces, right? My phone, my computer, like I try to be aware of it. With my new role, my new job, like I depend so much more on like being hyper attentive to emails and texts, but I have to be aware that that also can disrupt the relationship between those who I'm around. And so I think you bring up great points. The conditions for communication, foundational. And what I wanted to share is going to kind of build from that a little bit and talk a little bit more about, let's now say we've set these conditions for communication. So you're ideally here, you're not distracted. You're in a place where the expectation is that there's going to be some kind of communication happening. And now we can get to a tool that comes from the giant world. So there's a book about it. It's called The Communication Code. I would highly recommend reading it. And I will also spend a little bit of time today just on this podcast. John's heard a little bit about it, but I'll share more with him. And so please ask questions as I share out. But the concept is relatively simple. It builds on this idea of transmission and reception, is that behind everyone's transmission in the process of communicating, there's usually an intention behind it.
Yeah.
So this goes back a little bit to tendencies, motives, but maybe even a little bit less deep than a motive, but more like, hey, I really want to blank. And so there's 5 words or 5 types of communication in the code. So the first is to care. So one purpose of communication might be to show care. The other, to celebrate, to critique, to collaborate, or to clarify. So to talk about each of those briefly, John, when you hear the word care, what does that evoke for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a desire to showcase that either I want to tell you that I like you or that I appreciate you or that there's something that's important to me, right? To name that would be part of it, that there's something that matters to me that I need you to know about.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea of care, here's a very kind of classic example. So certain voice types, certain personality types are more inclined to want to fix things, and other voices are more inclined to want to feel things. And a classic rift that sometimes exists because my instincts in many ways are to fix. And I'll give you other words for that here in a moment. But Lindy, my partner, often is more about just needing to communicate something on her heart, something about her feelings, something, and that I'm not trying to diminish the importance of this, but if I'm not
But even though
clear,
you think that would be diminishing, it says what's important to you.
that's right.
Different.
Yeah.
Why would that be diminishing? It's not. That's important. But
That's right.
Yeah.
It totally is. And that's a great kind of call up to that idea too, that certain wirings are just thinking about the intentions of people's communication very differently. And so when we're not intentional, the experience of her transmitting something where what she really just needs is for me to receive that from a side of care. Wow, that must be very difficult. That's really hard. What do you need right now is a very different response than, ooh, okay, well, here's 5 different solutions to what you're going through, right? And
Yep.
I think for a lot of us hearing this, we could probably put ourselves on one side of the feel it or fix it spectrum. But to build on that, the other word, so care, celebrate, another one, celebrate the intention to honor what people have done, to pause and say, hey, team, we've accomplished so many of our goals. Maybe it's not all of them. Rarely is it all of our goals. And even if it is, you still have new goals that you're going to set the next few days. So celebration, again, certain voice types, very inclined to want to celebrate. Connectors, like, hey, we brought everyone together. This is a wonderful space. Let's make sure to celebrate all of the tremendous accomplishments. Whereas other voices are like, that's a waste of time. Why are we celebrating it? Like, your celebration's your paycheck. Like, this is a job, show up, get it done. Again, not bad, but their wiring and their natural disposition leads them to think that celebration is a distraction. And some
Mhm.
of you
Yeah.
listening to this are probably nodding and saying, yep, that's me. They knew they did a good job. I said, good job, let's move on. And so I think that celebration is another form of the transmission, the type of transmission that can exist when you're communicating. Third, to critique. This gets a little bit closer to some of my wiring. So, critique is I need to better understand what you've just shared, and I have some ideas, not even better understand, but more like I have some opinions about what it is you've just shared. I would like to bring a little criticism to that in order to hear your response, in order to make it better, but also to bring up some wonderings, some concerns. The fourth form of the communication code, or the fourth type of communication, would be to clarify. So, to clarify is a combination of two things, maybe asking a really great question to make sure you understood. And again, the goal of that question is not to critique. It's not like a loaded, tell me a little bit more about that because I'm really not sure when you said it this way, right? That's more about critique. But clarify is like, could you repeat back what you just shared? Or let me repeat back what you've just said. I want to make sure I receive that right, right? Clarifying can come in the form of the asking questions to somebody else, but it also can be the person who's transmitting the information to say, I want to be really clear about what our goals are for this next quarter. And then the fifth one is to collaborate. And to collaborate is what it sounds like, two people working together to come to a solution, to come to a better idea, to solve a problem. And those are the 5 forms of transmission, but also that requires a form of receiving it. So, how do you use it?
Well,
I
can I?
think
I would
is
like to ask some
yeah,
questions before. I mean,
please ask some questions.
so I think my question is the way that feels like it was presented is some people communicate in these 5, like some of these 5 ways, and others don't. Like I think when we talked about
Mm,
celebrate, some people are like, I don't communicate and celebrate. But I guess I have a question about that because what it
mm.
seems to me is these are 5 ways that all of us communicate at some level. Like everyone's going to want to celebrate something in a different way, but different personalities, and to the point you made earlier, different voices are going to communicate their celebrations in different ways, right?
Yeah,
Or for example, I was meeting with someone yesterday who was doing some coaching with me on my coaching, frankly, and he was giving me feedback, and I love feedback. I tend to ask questions in a way that presents the doubt or the I don't understand what you're saying, or let me be devil's advocate here,
mm,
but it's meant to clarify, but it can come through as a critique of what they're trying to coach me on. And I
mm.
had to say that to him at one point. I was like, hey, the way I get to understanding and true like ability to make change is fully understanding it, getting rid of all
Right.
the doubts in my mind, having you respond to them, and then moving forward. And he was like, oh, I'm totally fine with that. I like criticality, but other people don't, you know what I mean? And they take that as John's getting defensive. And maybe I am too. And that's something for me to think about. But to me, it is a process by which I clarify information, but it combines that. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, is
Dude,
it
yeah.
not that like some people don't like to celebrate, for example, but maybe their form of celebration is communicated in a very different way? Or, for example, you've been working at a company for 20 years, Josh, and we're going to bring you on stage and everyone's going to applaud you and do that. But you hate that form of being communicated towards celebrating you. You hate being brought on stage.
Mm.
And it's important people to know that for you, that there are better ways to celebrate you and to communicate that. Give me your
Gosh,
thoughts.
yeah. Yeah, great questions. Really great questions. I think there's a few responses I would have, and there's layers to all of this. I'm going to come back to your question, but I think to zoom out, I would say the first thing that I probably should have said in introducing this is that it's really important when you're communicating with somebody else to be explicit in naming the intention right off the bat. hey, like, John, we're about to sit down and talk about this podcast. Can we collaborate for the next 10 minutes around some of these ideas? Or, hey, we're about to kick off this meeting. Before we jump into our main topic, our strategy breakdown, data, whatever, let's celebrate as a team first. So, in some ways, what you're actually trying to do is polish the lines of your intentions in a conversation. Now, not literally every minute of a conversation needs to be recalibrated to, okay, now we're moving to this. But in chunks and in general phases, being very clear about like what the purpose of the communication within a team should be at that moment can give everyone permission to say, okay, this is not the time for me to bring critique. This is not the time for me to collaborate. This is the time for me to absorb, to receive this as care.
Yeah.
So when somebody on the team, and this has happened so many times, you have a person who is expecting or assuming that everyone in the room understands their comment as one of care. So, hey, I had a really tough meeting yesterday with this parent. It really blew up, and I just had to spend 30 minutes afterwards just in my office collecting myself. That person's intention could have been, if not explicitly stated at least, could or likely was to transmit care. This is a really frustrating situation. The team's job would be to receive it as such and to say, wow, Josh, that sounded like a really tough day. Do you need anything? But without naming that, what would often happen in this particular team is one person whose nurturing voice would often make a comment that was really anticipating care in the reception of it. The team would say, well, did you talk to the parent afterwards? Did
Start
you send an
critiquing.
email afterwards to recalibrate on the expectations for what a parent meeting should look like? And guess what would happen to that person in that meeting? The person who shared that comment was shut down.
Felt
The
judged.
person who brought the critique because they thought maybe that's what the person was actually asking for would get all flustered, and they would say, well, here we go again. How come every time I talk, you shut down? And
Yeah.
then the meeting would all of a sudden have a very clear turn towards a direction that wasn't helpful.
Yeah.
And so that's an example in which being articulate about the goal of what I'm about to share helps everyone else understand how they want to receive it or need to receive it. And also then, to tie to your point, John, be aware of the tendencies they have, which might be when I hear things shared with me, I'm assuming they want to critique, to collaborate, or to clarify.
Yeah.
And if that's not what they want, all of a sudden my response has created an unhealthy dynamic in that space.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I don't
I
know if that
see this.
answers your
Yeah, no,
question.
I like that distinction, and I like the idea of whether it's a team meeting or a one-on-one meeting. For example, hey, we're going through quarterly results today. We're really going to spend some time celebrating many of the elements of that, but then also critiquing as well, like critiquing problems that we see in the results and what we need to do to fix that going forward. Or hey, today you and I are in a one-on-one. I want us to collaborate about a project I want you to undertake. I want you to get clarity on that. But then in a follow-up meeting, it might be, hey, today let's spend some time critiquing the plan you have. And that will fit in with
That's
some
right.
celebrating as well. So they're
Yes.
set up to be like, yeah, today is more drilling down into getting this better, but I'm set up to know that that's the goal versus John just takes my plan and rips it apart. So yeah, I think
Mhm.
using these, there's probably other communication codes, but these five are really key and ones that you can always attach to an agenda or to a moment, it sounds like.
Yeah. And
Obviously, building trust with people to know how they communicate allows you to know when they're actually looking for care versus when they're looking for critique or
yep.
clarifying, right? So
Yep.
it's hard in those in the moment ones to do that, but that's where building trust with folks and building your relationship with it to know that about them to adjust is really critical. So
Yeah. I
I didn't mean
love
to
that
bog us
addition.
down. Definitely want us to move on to other ideas we have here, but I did think that was good and important to clarify there, like how we think about these.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I think one just tangible way to use it is your agenda for a meeting could literally move through like the communication code. We're going to start with celebration. We're going to
Yeah,
go to clarify. We're then
sure.
going to go to critique. We're then going to go to care. And then we're going to finish off with whatever word I didn't say, celebrate. I
I don't
forget the
remember.
order.
But
I've
yeah,
said these words so many times today, but you could literally break an agenda down into going through all five of these, so the intention of that meeting, each part of that meeting is clear, and your responsibility as both the transmitter and the receiver is to understand what it is and what it is not for. So,
great.
yeah, hopefully a helpful tool for everyone.
Yeah, so I think that's a great place to wrap for today. Josh and I really wanted to tackle, we've talked about the last few episodes about this idea of just to review a little bit, Transmission, obviously the thing we think about a lot. What am I saying? What are the things that the information I'm getting across people? But really important that you think that it's a shared partnership with receptive language, right? And then we really think the communication code that Josh shared that we'll be talking a lot more about in the future really gives you a framing for understanding the different purposes by which we all have to communicate. Not simply so that you can share that explicitly with others, or like, I'm communicating for this purpose, but you can be attuned to, oh, what are they trying to communicate to me right now? Are they communicating something they deeply care about? Are they really wanting to critique something that I've said or done, but they're having a hard time expressing that? It allows you to be, like, I think, more adaptable and adjustable to people's thinking too. And so with that, Josh and I do want to give you this homework for the week. We want you to take that communication code. And as a reminder, the 5 main things that I focus on in terms of why you communicate are care, to celebrate, critique, elaborate, and clarify. Okay. We don't want you to do it for your whole week, but perhaps in a team meeting, perhaps in a one-on-one, we want you to look at that agenda or think ahead to it and understand, what is the purpose of our communication in this meeting, and how am I going to communicate that to my boss or to someone I manage, right? And so you might say, hey, today I really want to focus on our critiquing of this problem we're solving, or of this, scenario we have, or, hey, I need you and me to collaborate and brainstorm on something. So we're just presenting a bunch of ideas today, right? So name that. The bigger thing is that we really want to push on too, because it often gets left to the wayside, is we want you to think about where you're celebrating things this week with your team. Really elevate that. And not just as like, oh, it's the 5th of these communication priorities I have, it'll fit in somewhere. Actually start with that and ask yourself this week, where am I celebrating things intentionally? How am I giving it real meat, not just something that's vague that I'm celebrating, but has substance to it, so that people hear it and see themselves in that celebration as well. So please start with that, but also be thoughtful about what sort of communication am I having in these different spaces this week. Pick one meeting where you really hone in on that. Anything to add to our assignment there, Josh?
Yeah, I think that's a really great push for all of us. And you can think of this, you brought it up earlier, John, about phones and family, and think about this even in your own home with your kids, with your partner.
I train my kids that if my phone's out, I tell my boys to tell me to put it away. Frankly, if I have it, I'm looking at it. And
Yeah,
they do.
with your phone.
Yeah, they do.
Even with the communication code with your partner too, and say, introduce this concept, try to introduce this concept to them and just bring it up. Yep. I will almost guarantee that if you can be intentional with this, it will help reduce conflicts. It can help empower other people, because one last point you brought up earlier, and I don't know that I answered it. Certain personality types need certain types of communication to be affirmed. And so some people don't necessarily feel like celebration is going to be as critical to them, but for some people, it's absolutely essential. Yeah. So as a leader navigating this middle of, well, this is who I am, this is how I communicate, so this is just how it's going to be. Your job as a leader is to make sure your communication lands with your team, and there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Mm-hmm. So really recognize that this isn't simply about you just saying what you want to get out of it. I want to critique, but you need to be varied and diverse in your communication transmission intentions, because your team needs a variety of different ways of receiving and transmitting communication as well. So it's not just for you, it's for your team. And I would argue that you should think about it for yourself and for your family too. So yeah, that's it for me. So, John?
So, yeah, good luck to folks, and have some fun with the idea of really thinking about why you're communicating and what you're communicating. You're going to mess some things up. You're going to get some things right. It's all part of the journey. So to close us out here, again, download our podcast wherever you get your podcast, subscribe to it. Give us a 5-star review. I don't care what Josh said. Make it a 5-star review, and leave a comment for us as well. Seriously, provide us with feedback so that we can share your ideas with us. We'd love to connect further. Share it broadly. Give to folks who can use this. And until next time, this has been Leadership Limbo, where we make space for the tension and tools for the journey. See you in the in-between.